For nearly a decade, a shadow moved quietly through the Midwest. 9 women vanished along secondary highways. Each disappearance was treated as an isolated incident. The first was Rachel Moore, 23, a student working nights at a roadside diner. She had dreams of returning to college, a strict daily routine, and a family who relied on her constant presence. On October 14, 2008, she walked to her car after closing the diner. She never returned home. Her car was found, doors locked, keys inside. Her phone was gone. Investigators searched, questioned co-workers, and found no evidence of a crime. Within days, they labeled her disappearance voluntary. Rachel's family objected immediately. She had plans, bills to pay, and no history of leaving without notice. But without evidence, the investigation stalled. 6 months later, Danielle Price, 31, vanished while driving home from a friend's house. Her car was discovered on the side of a rural road. No skid marks, no witnesses, no clues. Police assumed mechanical failure or voluntary disappearance. Then the disappearances continued. Linda Harris, Melissa Grant, and Tina Lopez vanished in similar circumstances. Each case was handled by separate jurisdictions. Each department treated the case as isolated. Family members reported suspicious vehicles. Witnesses described a dark SUV seen near multiple disappearance sites. Some even noted a man offering assistance to women along deserted roads. But these tips were largely ignored or dismissed. By 2013, 5 women had vanished. Still, no connections were drawn. Investigators failed to share information across county lines. Surveillance footage was overwritten. Evidence logs were incomplete. In 2014, an unlikely figure noticed something no one else had. A temporary data analyst working to digitize missing person files noticed repetition. Disappearances clustered late at night along specific secondary highways. Service roads, pull-offs, and isolated stretches formed a hidden corridor. She submitted a report. It was dismissed. In 2016, Laura Jennings, 28, disappeared after leaving a grocery store late at night. Her phone briefly pinged a cell tower 90 miles away. 3 days later, burned remains were found along a maintenance road. This was the moment authorities began to acknowledge a serial offender. Families who had been told for years that their loved ones likely left voluntarily were devastated. The pattern was now undeniable. A predator had exploited blind spots, and the system had failed. Each victim had unique lives, families, and routines. Rachel Moore was ambitious and disciplined. Danielle Price worked 2 jobs to support her young son. Linda Harris volunteered at a local shelter. Melissa Grant was a talented musician. Tina Lopez had just celebrated a promotion. But the common thread was the location: isolated roads late at night, areas rarely patrolled. Investigators now examined failures in police procedures. Jurisdictional boundaries meant that reports never overlapped. Witness tips regarding the dark SUV were filed, but never compared. Surveillance footage, when available, was overwritten or ignored. Evidence logs had omissions. Interviews were recorded but lost. Federal profilers provided insight. The offender is highly organized, patient, and calculating. Likely works in a job involving travel or exposure to roads and traffic patterns. Chooses victims based on routine, vulnerability, and opportunity. Uses restraint to avoid detection, leaving minimal evidence of struggle. Families expressed frustration and grief. Many recounted sleepless nights and endless what-if scenarios. One mother remembered warning police that her daughter would never voluntarily leave, but her concerns were minimized. Investigators theorized the offender's mindset, knowledge of law enforcement patterns. Patience over years, waiting for routines to be predictable. Exploiting blind spots, knowing jurisdictions won't communicate. Investigators reanalyzed the burned and damaged remains from Laura Jennings. Minor pieces of evidence, overlooked for years, suddenly took new significance. Forensic mapping identified a corridor of secondary roads connecting all 9 disappearances. The task force also considered the psychological impact of these disappearances. Families left without closure, struggling with doubt and anger. Communities instilled with fear. Roads once considered safe now avoided. Mental trauma that persisted for years. Psychological experts weighed in, explaining how serial offenders like this operate. They may blend into society, appearing ordinary while observing victims' routines. They study patterns for years, exploiting predictable behavior. They understand the weaknesses in law enforcement systems. After 2016, the disappearances stopped. No arrests were made, no suspect identified. Investigators considered whether the offender had died, been arrested for another crime, or simply learned to stop. Families were eventually informed that the cases were officially linked. For many, the announcement came too late. Years had passed. Witnesses moved away, evidence degraded. Today, the case remains open. Files are digitized, cross-referenced, and periodically reviewed. Investigators admit that time has done what early inaction began, making resolution increasingly difficult. Some believe the offender is still alive, living quietly, working a job that requires travel, watching the news, waiting. The most dangerous crimes are not always the loudest or most violent. They are the ones that rely on silence, on separation, on the assumption that no one will look closely enough to see the pattern forming. For nearly a decade, no one did. This case stands as a warning. A warning about what can happen when departments fail to communicate, when tips are ignored, when patterns are not sought. And a warning about the victims, ordinary women whose lives were stolen not only by a predator, but by the blind spots of a system meant to protect them. Each disappearance left families with grief compounded by doubt. Each unanswered question echoed for years. Investigators now re-examine every tip, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. Every attempt to connect the dots, every remapped location, every analysis of behavior increases the chance of uncovering what was missed. Because every investigation renewed, every file re-examined, is a chance to see what was missed. Every witness who speaks up, every tip analyzed, may finally unravel the silence. And until that happens, the story of the women who vanished along those rural highways serves as a reminder. Some crimes do not end when the victim disappears. They end when the world chooses to see what was hidden in plain sight, and for nearly a decade, no one did.